We began last time our study of what is known as Sri Aurobindo Upanishad. In our preliminary exploration, we saw a text of Sri Aurobindo where he describes the nature of the Upanishadic expression, capturing knowledge in the true sense of the word, not a mere thinking and considering by the intelligence, the pursuit and grasping of a mental form or truth by the intellectual mind, but a seeing of it with the soul and a total living in it with the power of the inner being, a spiritual seizing by a kind of identification with the object of knowledge is jnana. So this is the approach we are required to take to derive the full benefit of the Upanishadic expression, and it is in this sense that we will seek to study this text also. We looked at the overall structure of the Upanishad and saw its obvious similarity to the Isha in the number of verses, that this is 18 like the Isha plus 1, and the one we saw is in the center, the fulcrum, the pivot around which 9 before and 9 after are arranged, which simply states in the shortest verse in the entire Upanishad, Evam yat prakashate jagadananda eva tat. In this way, whatever is manifest is the Ananda, the whole world as Ananda, delight, bliss only. So this is the pivot, and you will see throughout it is an expression of the cosmic the cosmos itself from the perspective of Ananda. The very first verse we read last time sets the context with a large embracing vision. In English, Om, there is Brahman alone, the one without a second. Being and non-being are its forms, and it is also beyond being and non-being. There is nothing else except that. All that is contained in the 3 times and all that is beyond the 3 times is indeed that one Brahman alone. Whatever is in the universe, small or large, noble or mean, is Brahman alone. Brahman alone. The world is also Brahman. It is true, not false. In Sanskrit, Om Ekameva Dvitiyam Brahma Sadasadrupam Sadasadatitam Nanyat Kinchidasti Trikaladhritam Trikalatitam Va Sarvam tu khalu brahmaikam yatkincha jagatyamanu va sahadvodaram vanudaram va brahmaiva tat brahmaiva jagadapi brahma satyam na mithya. In the intonation, I have followed a similarity because there is nothing fixed for this, a similarity of the traditional rhythm. But you see, in the whole expression, there is a tight compactness in which large ideas are captured in just a word, in just a suggestion sometimes. And the very first word we saw last time, Om, in the Vedic sense of our exploration, Om is Brahman, Uma, and the silence that follows, representing the 4 degrees of expression of Brahman, the fourfold Brahman, and the Sanskrit words that follow, Ekameva Advitiyam Brahma. One only, not two, is Brahman. I'm making a literal translation and you get a sense of the compactness. Sad Asad Rupam. Sad is truth, Sat of the Satchidananda, which here has been translated as being, and Asad, not truth, not Sat, non-being. So Sad Asad Rupam, being, non-being, form. That is, being and non-being are its forms. And then immediately after, Sad Asad Atitam. Atita is transcending, going beyond. So it is at the same time, it expresses itself in form of being and non-being, and yet transcends being and non-being. Immediately after, one word, na anyat, no other, saying there is nothing else, there is no other. Now in this large picture already, being and non-being have both been accepted as equivalent terms of Brahman, and yet he transcends both being and non-being, and there is no other. Just with 3 small steps, you have captured all existence, all non-existence, all transcendence of existence and non-existence, and there is no other. Nanyat, just that one word. Nanyat kinchidasti. This kinchit, we had studied the term in the Isha Upanishad, yat kincha jagatyam jagat, the tiniest, littlest, smallest. So na anyat kinchidasti, even the tiniest bit is not other than this. So in the translation he goes, being and non-being. The translation is not by Sri Aurobindo, it is by Jagannath Vedalankara. So we don't take it in the strict sense as a perfect translation, but the best translation possible. Being and non-being are its forms, and it is beyond being and non-being. There is nothing else except that. So the translation misses this kinchit, nanyat kinchidasti. Even the tiniest bit there is not other than Brahman. The next, Trikala Dhritam, Trikala Titam. Again the same pattern follows. It is 3 kala, the 3 times, past, present, future. All that exists in past, all that exists in present, all that exists in future, or that could have existed in past, present, future. Dhritam, holding, containing. So all that in the 3 times is contained in Brahman. And yet, Trikalatitam, transcending all the 3 times. Again, in a large sweep, in just 2 words, everything in terms of time has been captured, transcended, and Brahman includes all of these. Trikala dhritam, trikala tritam va. Va meaning or. Then, sarvam tu khalu brahmaikam, as if capturing all that has been presented through the being, non-being, the 3 times and their transcendences. Sarvam, all this truly, verily, khalu, Brahma ekam, one Brahman only. All this is one Brahman only, alone. Yat kincha jagatyamanuva, the tiniest bit in the world, the tiniest atom in the world, even if you take that, or mahad, something large, massive, that also is Brahman. And then udaram va anudaram, generous, noble or not noble, even that. You wonder why? Because Here he gives you size first, small or large, tiniest atomic or smaller than atom or large, it is still Brahman. And then after that, Udaram and Anudaram. Why is he bringing in this aspect? What is translated here as noble or mean. The first is a sense of size, small or big. But noble and mean are values which are psychological. If we had to utilize the sense of size in the psychological domain, you have a feeling or you have a thought. You can't speak of a big thought or a small thought in that sense. But you can speak of a thought or a feeling that embraces, that contains, that is vast, enclosing, or which is tiny, limiting, petty, mean. So Udara or Anudara is describing the same idea of small or big, but in the psychological domain. Often this term Udara is used to represent generosity because it has so much, it contains so much, it gives so much, pours out so much. Here translated also as noble. But the essence of nobility is this capacity to carry with you. So, Udaram va anudaram, noble or mean, all that is Brahmaiva tad Brahmaiva, is alone Brahma, is alone Brahma. The insistence, the repetition has a powerful effect. Of course, you can feel its mantric effect. Brahma eva, it is Brahma only. That, all that is Brahman only. Again, Brahman only. And the repetition, Brahmaiva tad, Brahmaiva. And the effect psychologically, when we dwell on it in this sense, the first Brahmaiva tad, all that is Brahman, connects with all that was discussed, brought together now. And then the Brahmaiva is an affirmation which obliterates all the distinctions that we have been discussing. In the experience, when you have gone with your mind through all these, oh, it is one without a second, being and non-being are its forms, it is beyond being and non-being, contains all three times and yet is beyond all three times, small and big, noble and mean, all that is Brahman alone. But in your mind, the clutter of all these things is still there. The moment you say Brahman is Brahman alone, it has all been wrapped up into one, and then the affirmation comes, Brahmaiva, only Brahman. And in that affirmation, all the distinctions are dissolved. You see only Brahman. The utility of the initial passage, showing all these distinctions, is that it helps the mind to grasp all these things, which are the ways in which the mind categorizes and distinguishes the universe and its reality. Having brought it all together, brought it into oneness of Brahman, all differences are not obliterated and there is only Brahman. Brahmaiva tad, Brahmaiva. Now comes the particular message that is preparatory for the following discussion, and what distinguishes, separates this Upanishad from the most of the later teachings of Advaita. Jagadapi Brahma Satyam na Mithya, translated as the world is also Brahman, it is true, not false. Jagad, remember the term we have studied in Isha Upanishad. Jagat, Ja is born or existing. Gat is the root of Gati, speed, born of movement, existing by movement. That's the character of the world. If anything stops moving, it ceases to exist, it dissolves. Even a static object is made of a moving energy. And we had explored this earlier, we need not repeat. But Jagad Api, also Brahman, is also Brahman. So the whole movement of form and universe is also Brahman. And the affirmation of its reality, Satyam na Mithya, The two things to notice here: Satyam, it is true, it is real, it is of the nature of Sat, of sheer existence, of being. Na mithya, not false. This is a pattern which is often used when you want to complete a logical expression. You have to describe what something is not, and you have to then assert what it is. Then only the expression is complete. If you only say what it is, it may also be other things which you have not included. The truth may not be complete. So the negation, not this, completes the border of what is defined. It is a principle which is often used in the traditional logical formulations of knowledge. But here we find that idea or that particular formulation in the affirmation of the world. It is true, not false. If you had said it is true and stopped there, you could say, well, it is true, but it is also not true. But here it says it is not false, and that is immediately cut off. It is true entirely, without exception. The way he has formulated is slightly lost in the English translation, where the translation goes, it is true, not false, but the word mithya has a more subtle suggestion. If you look at the root, myth, of which mithya comes, mithya popularly understood as falsehood, myth, the root means relative. Of the nature of relativity is the true meaning of mithya. So there are many scholars following the traditional teaching of Adi Shankaracharya, who, having to deal with Sri Aurobindo's affirmation of the reality of the world, they go back to this root sense of mithya and say, when Shankaracharya said, Brahma Satyam Jagad Mithya, the Brahman alone is true, the world is false, he did not mean false, he meant it is relative. And one could take it in that sense. But the idea being, falsehood exists only within the domain of relativity. It has no absolute character, it has no absolute existence. And therefore one could associate the world with mithya, with falsehood in the general sense of the word. Or in its original sense, we would say the world is made of relativities. And within the domain of relativities, of course, true, false can play along together as friends. So one can also see this in a deeper sense as not contradicting but including the affirmations which say that the world is false. But it includes them not by accepting the world as falsehood, but as a domain of relativity, where falsehood can be one of the appearances of what is fundamentally underlying always true. So Satyam na mithya, Jagadapi Brahma, Satyam na mithya. The world also is Brahman, true, not false. The next verse takes up an expansion of this. And in the expansion you will see further facets are brought in, but it moves more comprehensively to an inclusive and affirmative expression. In English first, that alone is the transcendent being, beyond all the three times, beyond all the worlds, penetrating all the worlds, beyond being, beyond non-being, all being, all consciousness, all bliss, without beginning and end, the eternal divine. So we will see the Sanskrit carries something more deep, which is difficult to translate into English. Sa eva paratpara purushas trikalatita sakala bhuvanatita sakala bhuvana pravishta sadatito asadita asadatita, sanmaya, chinmaya, anandamayo, anadyanta, sanatano, bhagavan. Sa eva paratpara. That alone is the transcendent. Para, which goes beyond, paratpara, the transcendent. But immediately after, he uses this word, Purusha. Sa eva paratpara Purusha. He is the transcendent Purusha. In the translation, it comes as that alone is the transcendent being. But Purusha carries more than being. It is also person. It also suggests personality. At the same time, he is transcendent, he is also the person. And how do we understand that? Because transcendent means beyond all description or personality or relationships. In the experience of the cosmos, if we look at the domain which is made of relatives and the domain which is, or the idea of something which is absolute, we may say the absolute transcends all relativities. And yet it includes them. It is not separate from them. If it was separate, then it would be part of the relativity. So it includes them. And then comes an interesting idea. Within the experience of the relativity, you can conceive of the absolute, although you can never grasp it or experience it. And yet by conceiving it, you can experience a relationship with it. And so from within relativity, there is a special relationship with the absolute. On the other hand, seen from the absolute, when it includes the relativity within it, and yet transcends it, one could also call that a relationship, but of a very different order. And what is that relationship? From within the relativity, it is as if the all-encompassing, overarching, all-including that. And yet, you relate to it and receive from it all that exists. On the other hand, from the absolute, it is as if it leans to manifest and express itself in the domain of relativity. And in that, it is as if the Lord, the being, the person who presides over the whole expression of relativity. And we see in this a blurring of the hard distinction that the logic would bring in between transcendence and personality. So in the phrasing here, this is suggested, Sa eva paratpara Purusha. He is transcendent person with a capital P, we would put in English, or here as it is translated, being. Then Trikala Tita, Atita transcending the three kala, the three times, beyond all the three times, and Sakala Bhuvana Atita. Sakala means all, Bhuvana is domains, worlds or manifestations. So all the worlds, beyond all the worlds, he is. So twice we get a transcendence, beyond all the three times, beyond all the worlds, and then immediately after the correction and the affirmation, Sakala Bhuvana Pravishta. All worlds, Sakala Bhuvana, all worlds. Pravishta means entering, spreading out, manifesting, identified with. Pravishta, in the commonest sense, it is having entered the house, having entered the domain. So he transcends all three worlds and all three times, and yet, immediately after we are told, he also enters and lives in all the domains. And you see the suggestion and similarity with the Isha Upanishad, which starts with this idea, all this is for the habitation of the Lord. So even when he transcends, he enters to inhabit. Having entered, he is pravishta in all the worlds. Again, the same pattern follows. Sadatita, asadatita, asadatita. Beyond being, beyond non-being. Sad atita, asad atita. So sad and asad. Sat we have seen is truth, translated here as being, the sheer existence of Brahman. He is existence, but he is also beyond existence. And immediately after comes the affirmation. Sanmaya, Chinmaya, Anandamaya. Sat Maya becomes Sanmaya when you join. Sat Maya, the Maya word is of the nature of. So Sanmaya, Sat Maya is of the nature of truth. Chinmaya is the merging of Chit and Maya. So of the nature of sheer consciousness. Anandamaya, of the nature of bliss. So translated here as all being, all consciousness, all bliss. But you see, in the Sanskrit, the Maya suggests of the nature of. So, of the nature of sheer existence, of the nature of consciousness, of the nature of bliss. And this takes us to a more profound exploration. When we consider that which is unknowable, beyond all description, transcending all things, how can we even speak of it? How can you say it has a nature? You can't. And yet, that unknowable can know itself. It is not bound to unknowability, otherwise it would be limited. It can know itself, of course, in its own way, not in our way of knowing. And when it knows itself, how does it know itself? When it says, I am, the first thing it knows itself as sheer existence. I am that I am. In the biblical tradition, I exist, Sat, sheer existence. And then that existence is not a blank, it is utterly conscious. It is existence that is pure consciousness. And that consciousness is not a barren, flat consciousness, it is Ananda, bliss. Bliss as distinct from the human conception of bliss, it is a rich, diverse, all-inclusive, multifaceted character of the conscious existence. So, bliss, consciousness, and sheer existence are the three, and we would use the word characters or qualities of natures of its self-knowing. When it knows itself as existence, consciousness, bliss. And the three are indistinguishable, therefore we merge the three words and join them. We don't say Sat, Chit, Ananda, we say Satchidananda, because it is one experience, one complete reality. That's how it knows itself. And so this line, you will see, affirms his transcendence beyond being and non-being, and then immediately affirms its existence or its self-awareness, its quality of existence as all being, all consciousness, all bliss. I have recently had a deeper understanding of the various lineages in the Buddhist tradition, and in one of the discussions we had, this question came up. When they focus on the absolute, and the goal is the realization of the absolute, there is still an idea of the Buddha nature. And I asked, what is Buddha nature? How do you define it? Because the moment you speak of absolute, you can't speak of nature. And they said, well, it is the nature of the emptiness. That is the nature of the absolute. And it's a very similar idea when you discuss in the Buddhist tradition, what is the experience of Buddha nature? Well, it is all blissful, it is all illumination, it is utter consciousness, etc. So we find the same idea differently stated, but the terminology used is interesting because they speak of it as the nature of the absolute. And it is this which we find suggested in the use of the word Maya. Satmaya, Chitmaya, and Anandamaya, of the nature of. So, Sanmaya, Chinmaya, Anandamayo. And then, in English, without beginning and end, the eternal divine. In Sanskrit, it is Anadi Anta Sanatano Bhagavan. And you'll see the Sanskrit has deeper suggestions. Anadi, no, without, Adi, beginning, without beginning, and Anta, ending. So without beginning or end. Sanatano, eternal. Bhagavan, literally translated here as divine, God. But the root sense of Bhagavan is something deeper. And you see the term Bhaga, the enjoyment, the immersion of the divine. So it suggests an aspect of the divine which is enjoying the world, accepting the world, one with the world, even in his transcendence. And so you have without beginning, without end, eternal, always existing, the Lord in his, as enjoyer, as Lord, as Ishvara. So you find again the similarity here with the Isha Upanishad and the affirmation in the very first verse that all this is for his inhabitation and it is for the expression of delight, for the enjoyment and possession of the world. And the word Bhagavan here brings that suggestion. So the full verse in English, that alone is the transcendent being, beyond all the three times, beyond all the worlds, penetrating all the worlds. Beyond being, beyond non-being, all consciousness, all bliss. Without beginning and end, the eternal divine. We could even replace the word divine here with the word enjoyer with a capital E, the eternal enjoyer. So this is the second verse, and the third verse takes it to an elaboration of the ideas now introduced. He is without quality and supports all qualities. He has qualities, infinite qualities, and enjoys the state of being without quality. He himself transcends the state of being without qualities and the state of being with qualities. He is neither without quality nor with quality, because he is one and single. So you see, it catches this idea of the quality of the Absolute, the nature of the Absolute, or this movement of the Absolute knowing itself and then preparing to fully know itself in rich diversity of manifestation. But all of this comes from what? When he knows himself in all, as all quality, ananta guna, infinite qualities. But then the moment you say that, you are left with all these problems. How can he transcend and yet have qualities? So this entire verse dwells on this play of having qualities or not qualities and transcending both and yet playing in the whole play. So in the Sanskrit first, Sa nirguno gunan dhatte. So translated in English, he is without quality and supports all qualities. He is sa nirguno, without guna, nirguna, without guna, without qualities. And then gunan dhatte. Dhatte means supports, upholds. So although he is without qualities, he supports and upholds qualities. By not putting a specifier, supports qualities, you say he supports qualities, it means he supports all qualities. So, sa nirguno gunan dhatte, upholds, supports, even though he is without qualities. So, where did the qualities come from? He upholds them as if they are not him, and he is without qualities. Where did they come from? Saguno, ananta guno, nirgunatvam, bhunkte. So, the English goes, he has qualities, infinite qualities, and enjoys the state of being without quality. So, as if in answer to the question, where did the qualities come from which he upholds when he is qualityless? Well, the answer is, he has qualities. How many qualities would he have? Infinite qualities. And yet, he enjoys the state of being free of all qualities, even though he has all infinite qualities. In the Sanskrit, you find again certain further suggestions. Saguno, the guna is quality. Saguno means with qualities, affirming qualities. The English translation, you have to use the word with. He has qualities. But actually in Sanskrit, saguno means carrying, having or sustaining or affirming, expressing qualities. That's how you would translate literally. So saguno, coming with quality, expressing quality. And immediately joined with this, the other word, ananta guno, unending quality, infinite quality. Now again, when we translate into English, we say infinite, the mind looks at infinite as one term. So we say this is finite, that is infinite. And in our mind, the conception is still of two fixed things. The finite is small, it has limits. The infinite is large, without limits, but it is fixed. But the Sanskrit word is ananta. Anta means without end. Ananta is without end. And when you picture that, the phrasing without end, the picture is not of a fixed infinite. It is of an unfolding, unending unfoldment. And it's a dynamic picture that comes. So when you say ananta guno, without end qualities, the picture is of a dynamic expression where qualities flow on and on and on without end. So you see the English translation literally as infinite qualities is an approximation. The sense of dynamism is lost when you say infinite qualities. Ananta guno is unrolling infinitely. And then you realize, oh, that's what this whole creation is. The whole cosmos is this infinite quality, ananta guna, but it is unendingly unfolding. And it is this movement of unending unfolding that we experience as time. And nothing is ever repeated. When you say ananta, without end, the end would be you come to a stop, and after that, well, you would have to repeat all that you have. When you're going on revealing something new without end, you don't get a chance to go back to repeat. And that's the suggestion here, that as it unfolds its infinite qualities, it does not need to repeat. It is always something new that emerges. You will remember from this the definition of beauty in Sanskrit literature as that which expresses newness from moment to moment. And when you look at this ananta guna, the unending unfoldment of quality, it is expressing newness from moment to moment. And therefore it is also the all beautiful. It is the wonderful, adbhuta, with a capital W. And Sri Aurobindo uses these terms in Savitri, the all wonderful with a capital W. So he has qualities, unending qualities. And you would say at that point, well, then he is made up of all the qualities that he is expressing. And as if to correct for that error, we get the very next word. Nirgunatvam bhunkte. Nirguna, without quality. Bhunkte, enjoying. He enjoys himself in his state of being without quality. One would have assumed that to express quality is his enjoyment. Yes, that also. But he enjoys himself as much in his transcendence of quality. So, in the English translation it goes, he has qualities, infinite qualities, and enjoys the state of being without quality. Throughout, you find the pervasiveness of the sense of enjoyment. In the human experience, we can only enjoy when there is something to enjoy. But in the divine experience, there is the enjoyment of the something to enjoy, of the qualities that are expressed. There is equally the enjoyment of the transcendence or the existence in non-quality. So right now the emphasis is on non-quality. Enjoys the state of being without quality. And then comes the transcendence. The next line. He himself transcends the state of being without qualities and the state of being with qualities. So first we saw how he manifests unending qualities. Then we see how he is enjoying himself to be without quality. Now he transcends both of these. So in Sanskrit, Swayam chati vartate nirgunatvam cha sagunatvam cha. Swayam cha ativartate nirgunam cha sagunam cha. So he himself, Swayam, transcends the states of being with qualities and the state of being without qualities. This is a literal translation in English, but this Swayam suggests something. Swayam, by himself, is a term one can only use with a personality. So there is this play, it or that is not personality. But by now we have also seen him in his aspect of personality. So it's as if by choice he transcends being without quality and transcends being with quality. And then the next line completes the whole description. In English, he is neither without quality nor with quality because he is one and single. In Sanskrit, na nirguno na guni kevala eva yah. So the Sanskrit sense has a nuance which comes with the last word, kevala eva yah. He who is alone. Because he is alone, he is not without quality nor with quality. Because the moment you are with quality, there is something without quality. But he is alone, therefore he cannot be without quality or with quality, because they always carry the opposite with them. Because he is alone, kevala, therefore he is neither with quality nor without quality. So, na nirguno, na guni, not without quality, not having quality. Kevala eva yaha. The yaha is he who is alone. Kevala eva, because he is alone only, with no exception. And that is in English comes as he is neither without quality nor with quality because he is one and single. This term kevala is very important because in the yogic tradition it is also the root for describing a certain state of immersion in the divine. Kaivalya, of the nature of Kevala, being in the Kevala. The state of Kevala is described. Kevala meaning alone, single, without any other. When all sense of distinctions and separateness are lost, and there is the complete identity in a single, undivided one. And yet that is not a blank. The Sanskrit ending with yah, he, who is alone, only alone, eva, without any exception. He alone is one. So it describes also a certain state of immersion in the oneness. When we say that he is without quality, he is neither without quality nor with quality, because he is in this immersion in oneness without distinctions, without separations. So all idea of no quality or idea of quality are dissolved into that oneness. So you see in the unfolding here, several steps, each taking you a little further until all distinctions are dissolved, and yet they have been included before they are dissolved. So he is, we read it in English, he is without quality and supports all qualities. So there is a clear duality. He has qualities, infinite qualities, unending qualities, and enjoys the state of being without quality. Now we go to a higher level where he enjoys this state of being without quality, although he has quality. And now the separation between quality and non-quality has been as if blurred. He himself transcends the state of being without qualities and the state of being with qualities. We go a step further, third level. He transcends both. And then comes the fourth step. He is neither without quality nor with quality. And you can only describe in negation at this point, in the final transcendence. Because he is one and single. And it is he, a personality, a person, the Lord himself. The next verse then plays with a different aspect of the whole question, following the similar pattern of transcendence of time and of space and multiplicity, which we will take up next time. But we can just read it to get a sense of the continuity. He is beyond the worlds, yet he holds the worlds. He becomes the worlds and enters into them. He transcends time, becomes time. Infinite, he shines as finite. One, he becomes many. Formless, he assumes forms. He achieves all this by his consciousness force, which consists of knowledge and ignorance. So we'll see the full elaboration of these. And you see here again, all the key ideas which had been discussed in the Isha Upanishad are included here, but stated in a completely different way, approaching from a very different direction. And here is this play of the extremes, from the formless to the form, from the one to the many, from timeless to time, from infinite to finite. And this transition and play is sustained by his consciousness force, Chit Shakti, which consists of knowledge and ignorance. And again that pattern which we saw in the Isha Upanishad, the consciousness of oneness we call knowledge, the consciousness of multiplicity we call ignorance. And by this dual play of oneness and multiplicity, he forms all this creation. So we will take this up next time, which will be after a gap of nearly a month, during which I'll be out of station. And we continue this on 28th of July, a little over a month, during which time we will continue to show some video recordings of these talks or other talks to sustain the mood and the continuity of the study. For now, I would like to read all the three verses, the first three verses which we have studied, and you see the compactness of the first as if it contains everything, and then the emergence in the second and third of specific facets which were touched in the first verse and their elaboration. Om, there is Brahman alone, the one without a second. Being and non-being are his forms, and it is also beyond being and non-being. There is nothing else except that. All that is contained in the three times and all that is beyond the three times is indeed that one Brahman alone. Whatever is in the universe, small or large, noble or mean, is Brahman alone. Brahman alone. The world is also Brahman. It is true, not false. That alone is the transcendent being, beyond all the three times, beyond all the worlds, penetrating all the worlds. Beyond being, beyond non-being, all being, all consciousness, all bliss, without beginning and end, the eternal divine. He is without quality and supports all qualities. He has qualities, infinite qualities, and enjoys the state of being without quality. He himself transcends the state of being without qualities and the state of being with qualities. He is neither without quality nor with quality, because he is one and single. He is beyond the worlds, yet he holds the worlds. He becomes the worlds and enters into them. He transcends time, becomes time. Infinite, he shines as finite. One, he becomes many. Formless, he assumes forms. He achieves all this by his consciousness force, which consists of knowledge and ignorance.